software engineers here. I'll have each of you introduce yourselves and say what you're up to. But just to let you know, we want to have, we're looking for a lively discussion. If in fact, two of you could get into a fist fight by the end, it's going to be on YouTube. That would be best, because that would definitely make it a big YouTube hit.
But do we have insurance for?
I'll cover you. Okay. So why don't we start with Trishank? Introduce yourself and say what you're working on at present.
Yep. Hi. So I'm Trishank Kupusamy. I used to be one of Gene's students actually. So I was at NYU for 5 years ago, doing my PhD, cybersecurity. Got out, got a job, was a security engineer at Datadog.
Hi, I'm Akshay. I was also a student under Professor Callahan. So I just graduated this May 2019. I did my master's in computer science, and currently I'm working at Integral Ad Science as a data engineer in ad fraud product team.
My name is Trevor John. I work at FanDuel as Director of API Engineering of Draft. I'm not one of Gene's students, unfortunately. But yeah.
I'm Mike Hodnett, also not one of Gene's students. I'm not technically a software engineer. I'm a systems person, of different descriptions. As you can tell, I'm old, so I've gone through a bunch of different iterations of job titles. Currently, I am an SRE at Two Sigma Insurance Quantified.
What is SRE standpoint?
Oh, Site Reliability Engineering. It's Google for System Administration.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've got a few topics that I sent them, but you guys are all welcome to insert yourselves and ask questions at any point. So the first thing I listed was what was the biggest difference between professional, when you started working professionally, and actually you're very recent, maybe you can start, when you, from school projects to professional projects, and then everyone else can chime in.
Yeah, the major difference I see is in school you just work in your own teams, you don't really care about what kind of technologies are you using, and in professional I think the first thing you'll right off notice there will be a lot of meetings. So you would have to propagate what all things are you developing, what kind of libraries are you going to use in your product, so that there's also things needs to be considered security. There's a security thing like SecOps being introduced these days, they do vulnerability analysis and all those things. So we need to keep all that in mind, and also we have to propagate all these things to a team level as well as in program level, overall the organization. So that's the major difference I found, and yeah.
Excellent. Anyone else?
I think I'm an actual developer. I don't do any DevOps really. Well, I do quite a bit of DevOps, but it's not in my title. And the biggest thing for me is when you're writing code for an exam or a test, it's to an audience of one, your professor or your TA. And when you're writing it for professionally, it's for the whole team and your coworkers and you in 6 months when you're going to have to come back and fix a small bug. So you kind of have to think about readability a lot more.
Why don't you tell them what you're still working on the same apps?
Still working on the same app, yeah.
So tell them.
So it's a daily fantasy sports app called Draft. You can get it in the App Store, Play Store, or the website. Yeah, I've been there for 5 years. I was the fifth employee there, and we were acquired eventually by FanDuel about a year and a half ago.
How many customers do you have using your app?
Oh, I don't even know anymore.
Roughly.
So I guess daily active users.
And how many digits? Are you looking at?
No,
7, 10?
Yeah, probably 6 or 7. So
Hundreds
but-
of thousands, millions.
yeah, and those numbers on a Sunday. So
That's awesome.
So having real users makes a difference.
Yes, it does. Makes things more complicated.
Yeah, real users will break your apps in ways you never even imagined. Production is the best way to find bugs. You'll never find them all until you hit production. I think the biggest difference between academia class, with how you're programming for class, as the gentleman observed, and the real world is that you're working with other people now, right? So it's not just important to sit down and code, that's important, but often what's also equally important, if not more, is talking to other people, making sure that we get this stuff done. You often estimate, there's always deadlines, but they tend to slip. So that's the interesting thing about a real world.
And I think you'll find that you're not necessarily spending 100% of your time doing your job title. There's the meetings, there's networking, like in the small end networking, like with other people, building your brand or your reputation in the company as somebody that can get things done for a certain thing. And the other thing I would call out, I don't think, like most of my experience is seeing people coming out of school into like the jobs that I've had. Because my experience in school was so long ago, it's not really that relevant. But seeing them not necessarily like having to do like an eval, like you're a vendor. We've worked with Datadog in the past, and having to do a bake-off between two vendors that have similar but distinct products, and having to decide between that. That's not necessarily a technical decision. It can be more of a people decision as well. Very difficult to teach that.
Trishak, why don't you talk a little about what Datadog does and what you're doing at Datadog?
Right, okay. Yeah, so Datadog is an interesting company. We just went public, last month? It was great.
You didn't get me any shares, Trishak.
I'll see what I can do.
Okay.
I'll talk to management. But yeah, so it's a monitoring company, which means, so let's say you develop an app, right? Let's say like you're at Two Sigma, for example, and you want to monitor everything, your services, how they're doing, your infrastructure, your logs, your application traces, stuff like that. Datadog is like what we like to say is a single pane of glass. You observe your uptime, your latency, all that kind of good stuff. Honestly, the best thing to do is just go to the website, look at these pretty pictures, you'll see what I mean. So my role there is that I'm part of the security team. Our security team is actually quite large, one of the largest relative to the number of engineers in our company compared to other companies. I'm not going to name names. So they take security very seriously, which is cool. And one of the things that happened is that I was very lucky to meet our chief security officer, Andrew, who hired me because I had a particular set of skills that kind of match what Datadog was looking for too. So what I did there recently, I think it's safe to say it's the first in the industry. No one's done it to the best of our knowledge. So everyone basically these days DevOps. What does that mean? It means you need to be agile about how you deliver your apps, right? So that basically means what I like to say: robots are building and signing your apps for you, like on the App Store, for example. But have you thought about what happens if that robots get hacked? Right? Basically, builds and signs and distributes malware instantly, just like that. So DevOps is good, but SecDevOps is a whole different thing now. You need to secure your. So you don't want to slow developers down. So how do you do that without, so you don't want to blindly trust these robots. Long story short, we built our pipeline so that you don't completely trust it before you install what I call Datadog integrations, which are basically plugins. We check that it's signed by one of our developers. If not, you don't install it. So I think security is an important topic when it comes to DevOps.
So Mike, maybe you can describe your role now. I found when I asked students kind of jobs Mike's held, a lot of students aren't even aware that such jobs exist because we don't really offer classes in them. Mike's been a system administrator and a site reliability engineer, so maybe you can tell people what your job involves.
It was a couple years ago. It's a guy I work with now, but I worked at my previous job with. He stood up one day and was like, does anyone here have parents who can adequately describe what we do? And nobody put their hand up. So it's not programming, but it is like we're system administrators. We understand as best we can the operating system and the network and the underlying lowest level of the lowest layer of the technology. We have our fingers in a lot of pies. There's definitely a heck of a lot of security and other aspects to it that are fundamental. But we're we're kind of the guy behind the guy, or the people behind the people, making sure. I used to be the kind of person, oh, you need a new computer? Well, let's pick out a model and let's put a CD in it and install an operating system and customize it the way you want. And that would be the traditional sysadmin function, having a personal relationship with your server. But then later on, with the cloud, you know, building it out at a big bank, we built an internal cloud, and we realized this concept of pets versus cattle. Like system administrators have pets, they're part of the family and they care about them, and there's institutional memory about the individual servers. Where cloud is cattle, like just throw more stuff at it, everything should be exactly the same, everything should be exactly repeatable.
Yeah, this was
So-
someone from Microsoft, I think, who forwarded this analogy.
Is it, yeah.
And he said, you know, in the old days, our servers were like pets. We gave them individual names. When they were sick, we cared for them. Now they're like cattle. If they're sick, we shoot them. So it's literally a lot of times if a server in a rack of servers goes bad, you chuck it out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there used to be 2 rules of a particular operating system. Now we just call it like cloud system administration. For small problems, reboot. For large problems, reinstall. Like just start over.
Yep. And how many servers are you?
Well, my current company is quite small. The previous company, I can say I was at Goldman Sachs, and we had like over 100,000 hardware pieces of hardware, you know, in the many hundreds of thousands of individual hosts.
Is
So-
Two Sigma is in GCP, or is it?
Okay, so to be clear, I'm Two Sigma Insurance, and it's part of the Two Sigma group, but it's a small startup that's wholly owned by the founders of Two Sigma, which is a hedge fund. So yeah, we're entirely, well, about 80%, 85% AWS and 15% GCP. Nothing on-prem. Like I've got my laptop in here and it has everything I need for like we have printers in the office. That's pretty much the only infrastructure we use.
You said nothing on premises.
No on-premises. Yeah, sorry.
All right.
No physical machines that
Um,
issue.
No hybrid cloud. Like
unfortunately.
our hybrid cloud is cross cloud platforms, not like having a direct connection to AWS from a data center.
So, if you're having installation with several 100,000 servers, then you start to see why you need to do infrastructure as code, right? You can't hand configure several 100,000 servers. You need to configure them with scripts, right? And if you need another 10,000 servers, you can't have someone clicking through menus configuring the next 10,000 servers. They need to be.
I'm curious how Goldman got to 100,000, because I wonder if they did hand configure a lot of those.
Well, yes and no. I mean, not that many. Like the high frequency stuff might have had like the stuff that's a little bit closer to the higher revenue, and they tend to be a little bit stickier and stingier about like they want individuals that they can hold accountable and stuff. There's also some fundamental issues with like a cloud system where you can't guarantee the best of the best latency like situations. Like you really do want to put this thing in that shelf, like exactly right there, because that's where it belongs. That's not a cloud function. That's a old school thing. But no, I think, you know, how do you eat an elephant, you know, one piece at a time or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's not it just organically grew that big. But by and large, it was definitely like early on. We're not one at a time. Like config management was like an early version of this Uber automation that is basically what cloud infrastructure is.
Do you know how to catch a lion? You catch 2 lions and let one go.
I'll digest that one later.
Yes. All right, so in terms of, so a lot of what we know how to do is gained as we do it. We start to internalize certain principles, but it's useful to have some of them explicitly stated. So I'd say, for me, probably the number one thing I've learned over the years is captured by DRY. Don't repeat yourself, have one source for everything. Whenever I've violated that, I've come to regret it a little later. do you guys have any, particular principles like that you found have stuck with you through your career and you've said, yeah, I learned this and this really was something crucial. I try to think about it whenever I am coding, configuring. Hello, Tirapal, yes, Dennis has stepped in with his phone. If, we do have a working camera there? Oh, super, okay, well, thank you. So do you guys have any particular pearls of wisdom that, you've found, really have been, stood up over time?
One of the things like incremental development, this approach really works when you want to like have a faster release and also have like release the features in small batches. This helps really well with the product teams. They also agree with it. Like they also have a release in their hand, like in like small batches. And and there's also one thing that whenever I do coding, I think of like making it a more generic, which should be applied to every other data engineering team. So these are the few things I keep in mind before like doing coding.
Yeah, I have to say that the incremental development probably is right up there for me.
Yeah.
And it took me years to stop trying to code everything at once and figure out, I went faster coding in small advances.
Yeah, I think I would second that, which is I have a notion that I call gradual security. So sometimes security is a hard sell because we're like, well, you're slowing us down, or this will cost us too much time. So how do you do it? You break it up.
Yeah.
It really is it's really the only way to go,
Yeah.
right? So it's a bit of a compromise. You're like, okay, this is not the best, but it's better than nothing. And then you slowly work with them, and over a year, you have a very secure thing, right? So that's a good principle.
Yeah, in terms of security, like I have observed like right now in my like organization that security team will reach out to you, and like if there is any vulnerability, it will always reach out to developers to fix those things. So it's kind of like things like we need to keep in mind that a capacity we should keep in mind that we should also fix this, and also there should be a capacity to release your product, make developments, and yeah, and also like few of the migration projects are going on in our organizations. Like Python 2 is going out of support. I just had a talk with Eugene that it's going out of support, and like we are making an effort to.
Yeah, that's affecting
That's-
everybody.
that's-
They give us
yeah.
years of warning, and still.
Yeah, years of
Everyone's running head straight
So,
into
yeah.
that brick wall, like it's gonna be
Exactly.
a problem.
The other thing I would say, sorry, before I forget, is that people sometimes get married to solutions. I've been there, made my fair share of mistakes. Sometimes you're so married to the beauty of an idea that you fail to see that something else might work and it might sell easier. Like it's not even a matter of a technical thing, like Python versus Go, for example. You might like, I never write Go, I'm a Python guy. But if everyone else around you chooses Go, what are you gonna do? Fight the tide? I mean, sometimes it's also a matter of politics and taste, not just technical choices.
Yeah. So sometimes like product will push you that we want a faster release. We don't really care about technicalities, but we had to like convince them like, no, this is not good. Like we may have to like give a priority to the tech debt as well.
Technical debt is a huge
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So like in your like when you are in industry, you will have to like have some kind of leadership where you can convince your teams to actually give them like pros and cons, like what could happen.
Startup I'm in, it's there, it's just it's a little unclear, is the governance, like these are the ways in which we're going to do things. Now, it has to be malleable and agreeable, and there has to be a good reason for any rule that you set. But everyone has to walk in the same direction with the rules as they're set, because that's the way we all kind of can work the best together. If somebody doesn't like the way something's working, it's really important that there be a forum for them, whether you're second week out of NYU or been there 15 years, to make your case and get it right. But without the set of base, whether it's style sheet or style guides, or just fundamentals of these are the particular types of hardware you're allowed to buy and things like that. As soon as you start getting off that path, and you have what we call snowflakes, and snowflakes are unique and they're hard to manage, and and they don't scale. You're back into pets versus cattle.
I would say that this only applies to companies like once they get larger. If you're at a small startup, then
Mm.
it's easier to do these one-off things, and because everyone is kind of unique.
I wanna, we're not gonna fight like you were saying that we might, but small companies get bigger, and,
Yeah, sure.
and they get bigger. If they get bigger too fast without somebody stepping in and saying, hey, like, let's not fight the innovation, let's not fight the growth, but let's make sure that we're doing it in a way that we can hire new people and just bring them up to speed and get them going, cause you don't wanna be that person that that can't take a vacation, or gets called at 2 in the morning for every little problem.
I 100% agree. I think just having those hard kind of rules, especially thinking about like technology choices, when you're at a larger corporation, you're hiring people directly from school and different things, and you have a bunch of people ramping up and you can't directly manage them as like a lead engineer, then you need these processes in place, because that's gonna allow the team to grow faster and in a sustainable way. But when you aren't in that hiring phase, then you can just kind of manage everything uniquely, and it's a little easier.
So one of the ways I have explained DevOps is that agile development got going and the programmers were able to release software very fast, but operations was by and large disturbed by this idea, because operations by and large wanted slow releases, because releases were a terrible thing. Releases meant you were gonna get paged for a month because the system would keep crashing. Nathan, who's worked on a couple of our projects, you may have seen his name around on GitHub or something. His previous company, whenever they released software, they sent a team of engineers to the site, the customer site, for a week, because the software was gonna crash so frequently when it was released that they needed 5 engineers on site. So one of the things I've said, DevOps can be looked at bringing Agile into operations. So, people like Patrick Dubois said, let's not fight Agile, let's make ourselves agile. So Mike, have you seen, what kind of changes have you seen in the way operations works? Since as you said, you are elderly.
Yeah, well, I think it is a sea change, there's a fundamental difference where I was able to be a scripter before. I write mostly in Perl, but that's not a language that's used widely anymore. And now I have to actually write programs and write code, because we work with infrastructure as code. So we have brought in, now I think we might be talking later on about just how much DevOps is, everyone kind of adopts their own set of the DevOps principles within the team or within the company. It tends to be, if the company's kind of like mine, that still has a traditional infrastructure team, plus then the developers are on a different, we use the same sprint cadence, but we're not, we don't coordinate our sprint versus theirs. We know what they need and we try to get ahead of it. So now I'm doing code reviews and I'm being reviewed, and that's been different for me, because I'm not trained as a programmer, so having real programmers critique what I've been doing, I'm learning a lot, and that's a good thing. That's a genuinely good thing.
I think something that I've seen too is DevOps as like a team used to be kind of reactive, where something would break and you'd have to contact DevOps and they would have to go and fix it. Whereas now I'm seeing they're more proactive, so they're working along with developers at the time of the application deployment, or even before the production deployment, to really understand what this application is doing, and they have a lot more knowledge about the full stack rather than just like the hardware. And
In terms of from my organization, we have been following a scaled agile framework. So it's kind of like a scaled version of agile framework. So in short, we have around 30 scrum teams, and each scrum team has different scrum masters which communicate to each other if there are any dependencies or anything like that. So this helps. And at the scrum master level, these scrum masters are managed by the program managers. So there are around 3-4 program managers who manage the scrum masters, and scrum masters report to the program managers. So they get to know what things are going on at the organization level. And on above of program managers, there is a single release train engineer who is supposed to handle the DevOps at organization level. So this structure really kind of helps us. And in terms of planning, we plan stuff for around like 12 weeks. So we call the planning phase as one single program, increment program, and each like in 12 weeks we have around like 6 iterations, sprint iterations, and each iterations goes around like 2 weeks. So we have a planning well in advance, like what things are you going to commit each iteration, and this really helps us to like give a perspective for like product teams, like what are they gonna see, what releases are they gonna see in upcoming months.
So one of the things I've mentioned that in school projects is probably underplayed. Sometimes you get a person you're working with, but generally speaking, engineering, whether you're doing operations or development, is a highly social activity. And communicating with others and communicating clearly with others is a huge part of the process. Also, another thing that I think is a big transition from school to professional life is the size of what you're dealing with. I mean, dealing with a couple 100,000 servers, or dealing with 30 Scrum teams.
Millions of users.
And million users. I tell the object-oriented programming class, we're teaching you these ways to organize your code, and it may seem like, oh, geez, I could just get it, I just write it, hack it out, and it works. But Ubisoft there's someone from Ubisoft had a lecture that's on YouTube talking about Assassin's Creed Unity. I think is that one of the editions? And this version of Assassin's Creed has 15 million lines of C++ code and 5 million lines of C#. So organization becomes crucial. So the kind of thing where we're trying to get these tools in place and get this organization on small projects may seem like overkill, but as the project grows and you extend to more users, more servers, more lines of code, these things really become important.
Yeah, this is especially true with dynamically typed languages. Like Dropbox has some interesting articles now about how they're type checking so many millions of lines of Python, right? 10,000 lines of Python, you might still get in trouble, but millions is a whole different story. So I think a good way to rephrase what Gene is saying is, would I show my mother this, right? I mean, if someone, software archaeologist, someone discovered your source code 20 years from now, would you be embarrassed or not? So at least for yourself, you should definitely organize your code. Because trust me, 6 months from now, you're going to look at the code like, who the hell? Oh, it is me. and I don't understand how it works.
Yeah, as a scripter, I think coding is write once, like not read many, just write once. You need to do it again, you're going to start from scratch, and that's not the way to behave in an engineering team.
So let's say you came to an organization that, like our friend Nathan's, but was, programming like it was 1970, and they had no automated testing, no version control, no CI/CD pipeline, no monitoring, no code checking, no code reviews. As primitive as can be, except there are on computers. Where would you start? What would you say would be the most crucial thing to get in place first when you're going to start bringing these people up to date with modern software practices?
First of all, I think there should be a design doc for everything you implement. So it should be at component level, like what are things you're gonna include in your code base. So that's the first thing.
I'd get a really good salary. I wouldn't want to deal with that, but I mean, it's tough and every situation's unique. But trying to get some monitoring in would be the first thing. That's the most important thing. Like you need to know if your site's down, and that's should be trivial, right? With Datadog, it's pretty trivial to set up on anything. And, not to plug their company, but
Definitely no collusion.
yeah, yeah. We do not use Datadog, but FanDuel does actually, but my team doesn't. But yeah, I'd start there.
I think also, again, with the rules, but set where you wanna go, and anything new, work real hard to like tool the old stuff so that it can work with the new stuff, but start writing and like, don't write any more code in the old way. Obey your new principles right away and stick to them and just try to uplift the old stuff into the new, probably sooner rather than later, but things tend towards zero. You never really get rid of that last piece of hardware of a particular vendor or operating system. You can start at 1,000 and you get 200 in a couple of months, but getting to exactly zero, we have big parties when we get the last thing out.
There's always a tech debt.
Yeah,
There's always that.
and tech debt that is exactly what you're describing as tech debt. I don't know if that's part of like the class that you're teaching, but it's a fundamentally important thing to keep your eye on in your career. Just if you find you dug yourself a hole, stop digging. Like, don't keep doing things wrong. It's much easier for me to sit here and say that than to do.
Yeah.
This is true. I would also kind of dissent in the sense that there's too many situations where people rewrite for the sake of rewriting.
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
It's like something ain't broke, don't fix it,
Yeah.
People tend to forget this too.
Or they want to use the new technology.
Yeah, new
or
shiny stuff,
something.
but
Yeah.
it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's, waterfall style development, agile style development. It's also been identified, designed by CB. So you build you pull in the technology that's going to enhance your resume the most. This is a
Oh.
problem that happens.
Right.
People hear that something is hot on the market, so they force it into their company, and because they're going to leave in 6 months, and so they don't really care if it creates big problems. They get to put it on their resume, and then they leave and get a higher salary. How about what tools? So let's ask this. You can mention particular brands or projects, but out of the range of tools that are being used in modern software development, DevOps tools, are there any that you found are overhyped, that don't really live up to their promise, that, wow, we tried X and it was a waste of time, we never should have done that?
Boy, this is a loaded question, huh?
Yeah.
We're gonna get into trouble for this.
Well, you don't have to name a particular
Yeah.
company. So for instance, someone might say, that maybe we tried Kanban, and Kanban wasn't worth the trouble. For instance, right? I'm saying we can just name a broad area of technology. You don't have to name
I
a
guess-
company.
Yeah, I think so I come from a consulting background, so every tool kind of works well in its scenario. It's just when people misuse those tools that they don't work out well. So if it's like you saying you're doing Agile, but you're really not practicing it, then you can say, well, Agile doesn't work because we didn't follow the best practices. But I think there's ways to use any tools incorrectly. It's just you have to have the buy-in from every level.
One of the original Agile guys, so the Agile, people were doing this at the company I was at in the early 2000s. We did Agile. I didn't know the name, but I would walk out. I was writing a program for options traders. And I would walk out onto the trading floor and say, so how's it working? They'd say, good, anything you need? And they go, yeah, could we get a pop-up window that does this? And they'd describe it. I'd walk back to my office, I'd build it. 2 hours later, I'd come back out and say, reboot the software. Does that look like what you want? I didn't know that this was called Agile, but we were doing it. But some people got together and had the Agile manifesto. And one of them has a YouTube video where he says, what a lot of companies are doing is, water agile fall.
What?
So the whole process is waterfall, except they insert a little agile at the level of code development. So there's still like a year or two planning the software. They don't have the idea that we're just gonna develop minimal viable products and try them and see them. And then when the developers are done, there's still, you know, a long stretch of testing and deployment. So, you know, echoing what you said, these things are often taken up because if you're the CIO of a company and you're thinking, I'm gonna leave here in a year, you want Agile on your resume. So somehow or another, you're gonna tell people you have to do Agile. What that means, well, every week we have a Scrum, okay? Then now we're doing
Well,
Agile.
But
Right.
also, like, even people do this non-maliciously.
Yeah,
Like,
of course.
if you know, you're a large company and you see Uber's doing this brand of Agile and you're like, we want to be like Uber, you try to do that, but you don't really understand the full processes. That happens quite a bit, or you aren't able to kind of spread the knowledge down to all the managers that need to actually implement it. It's tough.
Yeah, exactly. And that, and you are not Uber, right? I mean, Uber is, I don't know how big it is now, what,
Yeah.
10,000 engineers maybe?
Yeah.
What works for them may not work for 100 engineers, right? It's a
Yeah,
question of
exactly.
scale.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Trevor, you've been developing for a while now. What's different in development today from when you started?
I don't-
Biggest differences, let's say.
I don't, probably not much. I don't know. Yeah, it's the same. I think I've just gotten a little better at it. I think, yeah, now maybe there's, I don't know, but yeah, that's a hard one.
I don't think so. I mean, I think a lot has changed, right? At least, sorry, from my point of view, which is now you're expected to ship your own code.
Yeah.
I guess
That
that's
wasn't a
good.
thing.
I guess when I started, I was always expected to manage our deployments,
Got it.
whether like using some managed hosting service like Heroku.
Got it.
So like we didn't, have DevOps teams. It was smaller companies. So
Ah, I see.
yeah, so
Because I work for a large company where people, you write the source code and it's
Yeah.
someone else's problem now, go
Yes.
build it and maintain it and install it.
yeah, that goes back
Developers
to
are like
the.
screenwriters, you don't want them on set,
Yeah.
let the operators have them after.
Right.
But that goes back to my point about DevOps being like proactive versus reactive.
Right.
Whereas like before, it was the developers build this application, just hand it off to DevOps.
Correct. It's a lot of
like,
silos.
Yeah, yeah. And that's definitely not the case, and I see that going forward. That's really important.
Communication has also increased a lot, like in terms of like developing softwares across the teams.
Yeah, yeah. I guess everything's gotten better. Like
Yeah.
that's for sure. Like the clouds are so much better now.
Clouds are so much better. Remote work is actually a thing now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
I think
Yeah.
the IDEs have like grown by leaps and bounds in the
Oh,
last 5
yeah.
or 10 years.
Yeah, I actually switched from Vim to VS Code. VS Code is really good.
Yeah,
I'm
What-
still
what
using
just
Vim,
switched
so
Visual Studio Code. It's
Visual
actually really good.
Studio,
I'm telling you one.
yeah.
It's good.
Trader.
even then, just within VI or Vim or whatever,
Yeah.
there's like I don't do it. I use VI because I'm a sysadmin. I have to
Yeah,
edit
right,
files, but
Oh yeah, you can VS Code your way
But,
into.
but I don't use it for development anymore. But I do see some of my coworkers, and they have it just as colorful as IntelliJ or VS Code. But yeah, Vim will make coffee if you find the right thing to
No, that's
put
Emacs.
into it.
I love VI, but Emacs is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we might get in a fight now.
Yeah, we might get into it.
Some battles of old school sysadmin or Unix types.
So what if you were advising a student who's working on their undergraduate degree, as these students largely are, or their masters? What would you say is the most important things you would focus on learning to get ready to go out on the job market?
Maybe learn a lot of like cloud concepts, cloud technologies, because most of the companies are going majorly on cloud right now. Other thing is building infrastructure as a code, maybe use technologies like Docker. So yeah.
Trishak, your PhD thesis dealt with Docker. right?
Overeducated. But well, Docker used some of the stuff we were doing. I think honestly, an internship is the best thing you can do for your career, right? Because you can't learn everything in school. You just gotta go out and like,
Yeah.
wow, I'm drowning. Do I even know what I'm doing, right? And you gotta get out of that feeling. Scary at first, but it's also exciting. That's just my hot take.
I guess the best advice I have is just like finding a good manager.
True. This is also
This is
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing
This is true.
you.
So
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's so many people that come out of school or boot camps that just like get thrown on teams and they don't really get to learn from anyone else, and they're just kind of left out there to figure it out themselves. It's really important to find a manager who's going to help you kind of grow your career.
How do you do that though? How do you get a
Yeah.
feel for who's
You ask questions. You ask them like, "How would you manage me?" Like, I'm junior, so in your interview, just say like, "How do you manage your junior reports?" Or
Yeah.
"What do you do to help?" And if they have an answer on hand, that's generally a good sign. If they kind of flail around, then you can, figure it out yourself.
Another way to get that, I think, is like, and this is just interviewing, whether you're interviewing for retail or a computer science type job. Know who you're interviewing with. Like spend some time Googling the company, learning about them, and then ask them. You can even ask them non-technical questions about the product that they're doing, whatever it is, whether it's banking or log collecting or whatever. Like, be knowledgeable about it, because it'll help you learn from the manager what the manager knows about it and how much passion the manager has and how much they're gonna honor the questions that you have. Like, if the person's not all that engaged with the overall product, that's probably not gonna be a particularly interesting job for you to have. And then on a slightly different topic, I think what I would really focus on while I'm still in school, or wish I had done more, because I'm an infrastructure type person. Like, there are plenty of opportunities in any computer science degree for operating systems and security, like, principles, to learn, like it's important to know the cloud technologies, but in a weird way, it actually obfuscates the zeros and ones. But you're in school, like, you gotta learn the first principles. Like when you did calculus, you had to do your derivatives based on limits and all that stuff. That won't be immediately useful. It won't be useful in the first month or two. But after 10 years, if you have that foundation, it'll grow your career a whole lot better. To know, like, your networking, your different types of memory and stuff.
Yeah, the particular trendy technologies come and go, but it's still
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
Turing machines down at
Well,
the
yeah,
bottom.
like, so like 30, 40 years ago, before my time, computers took up entire buildings and
Oh,
you
yeah.
scheduled time on them. Well, now they take up entire buildings and you schedule time on them. Like, it's not, history doesn't always repeat, but it rhymes. Learning the principles is really important.
Yeah, I think that you hit on a nail. Two very important points to follow. Trevor, the first thing, a good trick I learned is to talk to colleagues and ask them, "Hey, can I talk you off the meeting? Right? Can I ask you questions?" The second thing is, like you said, important. It's meta learning how to learn.
Yeah.
That's the most valuable thing. Because 10, 20 years from now, I guarantee you'll be different. You won't even recognize what you're looking at, but you still got to know how it works. So.
Yeah. And don't hesitate to like keep like one-on-one sessions with your manager. Like, always ask for questions. Like, I do it every week. I discuss with my manager what I have learned so far. Like, we have a plan for like in upcoming 3 months what you'll be learning. Like, also keep a separate time for your learning as well as you work like on things.
And colleagues and managers in other teams too.
Yeah.
And this is a funny story that I think I'm allowed to talk about with Goldman. Like, it's a huge company. There's 30,000 people and 10,000 technologists of the 30,000. And I had a boss there that was like, "Mike, your network isn't big enough. Like, you're good at what you do, but only about 10 people know that." So you had me like meeting all these different people. Well, right around then, Goldman had a huge amount of they were hiring young people, and the other people were kind of leaving. There's a lot of churn, a lot of turnover. So my network that was really big at Goldman is now at Bloomberg and Two Sigma, and that boss is now somebody at Two Sigma. It does help, like, in your career to have, even if you're staying, for 40 years in the same job, it's really important to have people that are on your side, outside of your team as well, because they'll let you know about things that are coming and give you a perspective that you can't just have from your two eyes looking forward.
And there's so much, I tell students, I say, well, do you know Docker, do you know Travis, do you know this? And sometimes students are a little embarrassed. They go, I said, no, you don't know it. There's so much technology out there that, seasoned professionals don't know 99% of it because there's tens of thousands of products. You look at just like a DevOps family of tools, and if you know 10% of them, you're really doing well. So it's extremely valuable to be able to contact your friend and say, hey, have you used Travis? Have you used Jenkins? How did it work out for you? So that kind of thing is great because you're never going to have experience in everything that you possibly might want to use.
Hacker News is a good resource. You guys read Hacker News? It's good, but it's also a lot of hype there. Don't buy everything, but some are interesting, good reads there.
Even Medium. You
Medium,
should-
yeah, that's true.
Medium
is
is
good
good.
these days, yeah.
Yeah, and like you might have heard about like last week, Google released like they cracked the code of quantum computing. So it's kind of like quantum computing. So classical computers have states only 0 and 1, but quantum computers can have like infinite number of states between 0 and 1. So maybe in future the face of computing is gonna change. So.
Hope so. We don't have to do our jobs anymore. Just let the computers do
Quantum
it.
DevOps.
Quantum
Ooh, I like
DevOps,
the sound
yeah.
of that.
So is the DevOps engineer there or isn't he?
Exactly.
You have to
You
look
have to
inside.
open, yeah,
You have to
yeah.
open the office to
Yeah.
find out if he's there or not. So why don't all of you, we've got an opportunity to ask questions of some people who are actually holding the kind of jobs that you're probably going to be looking for in the next couple years. So let's get some questions from the students here.
Do you guys think that nowadays is it more valuable to invest our time into getting a master's or PhD, or is it more valuable to use that time to get work experience?
I know what Trevor thinks.
Yeah.
What are you working on your master's
No, absolutely not.
Good.
I think it depends on what you want to do in the long run.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to be in security? Security, you probably need a PhD. There's a lot of math.
Not really. A lot of security people I know don't even have formal training at all, which is great. Security is one of those rare fields where like, you have a degree in what?
Yeah.
Like, what's the word for botanicals, and they end up becoming security. So
Yeah.
that's one of the few fields. I think I get what you're saying. As the
Yeah.
overeducated fellow here, I will vouch for don't overeducate yourself. Like, it depends what you're doing. I'm not saying a PhD didn't open doors for me. It's great, but if you want to do a PhD, you probably want to become an academic. There's nothing wrong with that. You just got to decide what you want to do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't really need a PhD.
No.
It's also quite possible, if not likely, that once you get a job, your postgrad will be paid for or largely subsidized. Like the banks will do that
Yeah.
generally. I should just disclose to the panel as well as to the group, I don't even have a bachelor's degree.
Nice.
So, but
Respect.
it was
I
1996.
think this is
and,
the least educated, most educated.
So,
Yeah.
Oh, it's a spectrum.
yeah.
It took me 25 years to get my bachelor's.
Yeah.
I think I
Nice.
was the slowest bachelor degree earner ever, perhaps.
So yeah, I mean, I don't recommend my career path. Like, I got real lucky. I came out of school or stopped going to school in the mid-90s, right when the dot-coms, what you guys call tech startups now, when they were just taking off. I got a job doing tech support, like answering the phones, and then that led to a network admin job, that led to a sysadmin job, and then so I Mr. Commensurate experience, not
Yeah.
like a degree.
Yeah, the problem is people punish you, right? People say they don't really care about degrees, but they do. How many people hire like high school students without degrees, right? I mean, based off a Udemy certificate, so especially in data science. Like, if you're a PhD in data science, all of a sudden you're making big bucks.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
there is an academic pursuit to the industry and to the job. Like I haven't had to do a test or you know, perform for an exam or anything, but you have to be learning all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It,
From my perspective, like I did my bachelor's in India for 4 years, and then I was deciding whether to go for master's or not. But I went for a job for 1 year and then decided like what are my interests. Like I found out my interest, that my interest is in data and DevOps. That's why I came for master's after that, and yeah, I did my master's and then yeah, just working in specific domains.
And one other thing I would say that's not technical at all is like
Yeah.
focus on being interesting.
Yeah.
Like you want to be a good coworker and you want to have interests, and they don't have to only be about work.
Right.
So if you want to stay in school and, you know, keep doing your computer science stuff, but if you have a passion for botany or theology or some other thing that's off the beaten path, it's gonna help arm you for being interesting to your coworkers, which will help everyone have a better career.
How do you, I think you guys like briefly touched on this, but how do you make sure that, I guess, knowledge and skills are distributed amongst your team or amongst the engineers? So if someone joins a team that's like really bright at something, or someone, or like new hires might come that really don't know certain skills, how do you guys eventually kind of spread that knowledge?
So we follow knowledge transfer sessions. So there are like
I hate that word though.
Yeah.
Managers like right before
Yeah.
you leave, like make sure you do
Make sure,
knowledge.
yeah.
transfer.
So yeah,
Bus
that's
factor
true.
of 1, right?
So yeah, whenever some new hire comes, we have a particular documentation they need to follow first, like what are the standards of the company, what code practices they need to follow, and at the team specific level, like you would have a companion engineer who would like mentor you, like how things are working here. So there are like you can don't hesitate to schedule knowledge transfer sessions with your teams.
Yeah, usually people will be happy to talk. People
Yeah.
love showing off.
Yeah.
But some people are, how do I put it politely, assholes about it.
Yeah, you don't want castle builders, like people
Rock stars.
who are like well, even more than just rock stars, just like I am good at this and I'm going to be the only one who knows how to do it, and some illusion of job security
Yeah, right.
comes out of that.
Yeah.
It doesn't ever work, but for a little while it will, and that's bad. That's a toxic person to be on your
I
team.
agree.
You can't really always get around it or do much directly about it, but it's not a attitude you want to foster on your team. And then the other thing I'd say is in your Scrum or your DevOps team or whatever like unit of group, everyone should have enough responsibility for everyone else that it just naturally happens, that
Yeah.
people have to at least be able to get through the day. Maybe they're not the best expert at the particular thing that's
Yeah.
going wrong, but patch it together so that when the person comes back from vacation, they can fix it.
And sometimes developers just care about coding, but documentation should also be given a priority so that everything is like up to date, so that whenever someone leaves, like they can just read the documentation and just take over it. So
I hate documentation.
I hate
yeah,
documentation. More than
people hate
testing.
it, but
No, I love testing. I think testing is your documentation. I rate, so if you look at my code and my team's code, there's literally probably maybe 100 lines of documentation, but we have more lines of tests than we do of application code, production code.
Nice.
And that just like, if a test fails, you know you've broken something, and that should document what the class or module is supposed to do. I think it goes back to like, it's up to your manager or the team lead to really manage those situations well. Especially for you guys, if you're going into the team as like a junior engineer, it's tough for you to just like go over to the, senior developer and just be like, what are you working on? Like, can you teach me? Because he or she is gonna be very busy. So you need to provide that feedback to your manager and say, hey, like, I see what this person's doing and I think it's really interesting. Is there any way that I can work on that with him or her? And just having that communication and rapport with your managers.
Do any of you do pairs development?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, pairing's great for learning. Pairing's the best
Yeah.
thing that you can learn.
Yeah, I started in tech support, And after a while, the president of the company, who was a coder, said, hey, you look like you got this down and pretty sharp, you want to start coding? And I said, okay, and I started by sitting next to him at his desk. And he would say, okay, we're gonna do this now we're gonna change this, and this was my method of learning to code.
Yeah, that's a quick way of learning instead of like following the guides. Like you can have like actual practical knowledge while doing the
Yeah,
sessions.
I highly recommend working in pairs whenever you
Yes.
can. They find you think, well, we're just only one person's typing, right? So we have to be slower. It turns out you put out code just about as fast, but higher quality, because something you overlook, the other person goes, oh, don't you need to increment I first? You go, oh yeah, no, that's right.
Or your
So-
self-consciousness of somebody looking over your shoulder is like, I better do this right.
Yeah, and talking out problems, I had a colleague at work who was my go-to person. I would walk down the hall, and typically, he was the person who developed PropArgs first, which is being used in Ninja, and he and I wrote an article about it, and I ported it over to Python. But I would go down the hall to him, and I'd go, Rob, I'm trying to get the option display to do this, and then when they click on it though, the window doesn't come up in the right place, and I guess that's because, oh yeah, I need to set the window position before the mouse click occurs. Thanks, Rob. And he would say, but I didn't say anything. But simply talking about the problem to someone else is a great way to clarify your own thoughts about it. So again, programming is a social activity. We've got a couple more minutes, so more questions? Anything else?
Would you say that your daily or weekly schedules are more like structured, or they're more like on the dynamic side?
People throw meetings you don't expect. I mean, some weeks are more interesting than others, but if it starts looking the same, you should find a different job. I would say that.
I mean, I think it's structured around agile for us anyway, or whatever.
Right, on a
So
weekly
we
sprint,
have
yeah.
we have our retros, we have our, and those are the only meetings I go to, which is so different from where I was at the bank, where I was just professional meeting goer, and I couldn't really get any work done. I was just going and sitting there and helping people make decisions, and then other people did the work. I didn't really like that job that much.
Yeah. Right, I'm in a bit of a weird situation right now, but in general, it's pretty, it's gonna happen that week. And I think kind of to your point, like, doing the same thing week over week in like structure-wise is okay, but if you find yourself stop learning, or if you think that you're all of a sudden, you're feeling like you aren't growing, that's when you need to start looking for another job.
And one more thing, I've definitely had jobs, particularly on the infrastructure side. I'm trying to sell it, and this won't necessarily be great at selling it, but they tend to be like, there's still gonna be a 24/7 coverage situation. Like if you're a production bank,
Oh,
so
yeah.
even at Goldman, we were like follow the sun. We had offices that it was daylight at all times. But if I was on call for that week, once out of 2 months, I really did have to be there kind of to take over from the London office and kind of be the person that is doing my job, but the phone might ring and I have to do something specific.
Yeah.
There can be like shift work like that, but generally nowadays, we've either moved to a situation, even in the smaller companies, where you don't have like 24/7 people in the office. But it might come up, and I wouldn't completely like spurn the notion of that job, particularly early in your career. Everyone pays their dues some way.
It's true, being on call is more of a thing now, even for developers. It used to be that they
Yeah.
kept people separated, but yeah.
But
on
it's
call-
nice because you can do it from home.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
so
true.
It's not, you don't have to be near the hardware. But yeah, I would also recommend some people have really strong passions for industries. I don't. So for me, consulting was great as the first like job because I get to see a bunch of different industries, work on a bunch of different teams, have a bunch of different experience, and really learn how different teams work and how good situations and bad situations. And then with your second, third job, you can kind of figure out, you know, what do you develop that passion for? Is it an industry? Is it a specific technology? Or is it, you know, maybe you just like working with this certain person. I know plenty of people who just, wherever this person goes, they follow. And that's fine. They have great teams at each place they go, and that's more important to them than what they're actually building. So it's really up to your personality and what you're passionate about.
The worst week of work is the week where you have to grade 90 object-oriented programming midterms. That's second place is the week you have to peel off your fingernails one by one, but worse is grading 90 midterms. Anything else before we end off? Any other questions?
Did TA so grade the test?
Not in this class. If I were the course coordinator, they would, but I'm not.
We have one more.
Oh,
Yeah.
Carol.
I guess this is related to the previous question, but switching from like education to the job, I guess job environment, job to job, like how difficult is it to like adjust to the new pace or like getting used to the pace of it?
It's what I remember, it was really tiring. I would like come home Friday and I would just like not want to do anything.
Yeah, you would struggle for like 3-4 months, but
Yeah.
once you like get a gist of like how systems work in the organization, I think then you're fine.
Yeah, like the first month will be quite unproductive. You will look stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not to, yeah, I guess we're all kind of freaking them out a little bit, but you'll be very bad at it at first. And you'll be very used to being very good at it, and then all of a sudden, you like, and that's your first job or switching from one job to another. I've had jobs where, like, I've changed jobs and had a huge increase in my remuneration. And I'm just sitting there like this sort of Damocles over my head, like, they're gonna notice that I suck at this job and I'm gonna be out of here at any moment. You know, and everyone around me is like, don't worry, you know, you'll be fine. And then 6 weeks later, I'm like, remember that time I thought that I was gonna get fired? Like, I'm totally busy now and I'm totally like doing my job, and it's.
Okay.
A big thing that I've noticed in there's a DevOps course at Courant, and it's taught by a guy who's an IBM DevOps consultant, and I've gone to his classes and met with him a few times, and he said, oh, students don't really learn debugging. And I said, yeah, the primary debugging method is professor. And this is something that you're going to have to conquer, because ultimately we're the people, we're the engineers, we're the people who have to figure it out. This software won't install. Installs are, you know, an awful thing to go through. But ultimately, you know, it's great. We always ask for help, right? But when push comes to shove, I'm the engineer. I have to figure out the problems. And this is something just to develop, to prepare yourself for the transition, develop the idea that I'm going to wrestle with this problem and I'm going to do my best to solve it. Yes, I'll go for help. You know, you don't stay stuck forever. But you don't want to just see a problem and say, well, for some reason the software failed. No, we're the engineers. We're the ones who figure out why it failed. Yeah. So this is a big thing, I think, that the idea that some mysterious problem that happens on the install or when you run the software is first and foremost our job to figure out. And yeah, we go for help when we're stuck, but we have to give a crack at it ourselves first.
I do think though, like for, you know, when you're right out of school, when you run into hurdles, like default to asking for help, because there should be someone at your company who's your companion or your manager that's there to help you. And you don't want to be sitting at your computer for half a day trying to figure out how to install something when the person next to you probably knows how to do it, like off the top of their head. So, I do think, though, like for, you know, when you're right out of school, when you run into hurdles, like default to asking for help, because there's should be someone at your company who's your companion or your manager that's there to help you. And you don't want to be sitting at your computer for half a day trying to figure out how to install something when the person next to you probably knows how to do it, like off the top of their head. it always depends on the situation you're in, but,
Mhm.
you know, ideally you have someone there to reach out to, and they can spend half a day with you, just like ramping you up.
There is a benefit to figuring it out yourself though, cause you feel better for it and it goes in a lot better than somebody just telling you how to
Because
do it.
sometimes you are also the only one looking.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, I would say you take a crack at it.
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah,
take
you're gonna
a
be-
crack at it,
Yeah.
and
Well,
then,
you have to balance
at
what
a
the
certain
actual,
point, then you say, okay, I'm spending too much
Yeah.
time on this, I go for help.
what's the cost of this
Right,
thing not
yeah,
happening
right.
while I'm
Yeah.
looking at it and balance that.
Yeah,
again.
you
So-
don't stay stuck all day,
Yeah,
but,
but don't be scared to dive in and dig deep.
Yeah.
right, right.
People get scared.
Yeah.
Everybody gets scared. It's okay.
Yeah. Sometimes I follow official documentation that helps, like for the libraries, and maybe Stack Overflow helps sometimes.
Yeah.
But sometimes it has a bug, and you're like, wait a minute, it's
Yeah.
not doing the right thing. Most of the time, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
But sometimes it really is the mistake on the other side.
Yeah.
So.
I
Yeah.
once found a bug in the C compiler I was using,
Nice.
once, in many, many years. Another thing is probably it's my mistake, when you hit something, most likely.
Most likely, yeah, 99.9% of the time,
Right.
unfortunately. it's just-
Sometimes the tool is broken.
Yeah.
But the tool's used by 10,000, 100,000 people.
Right.
They've probably gotten most of the bugs out. Probably it's my code. And that's something you have to adjust to, that your default should be, I did something, my code is wrong somehow.
Yeah.
And only when you've exhausted that option, you say, well, maybe the C compiler is broken.
Yeah. Then you can reach out to their support teams. Like recently, I have been like,
If it's a C compiler,
Yeah.
you're wrong. It's not. It's not the C compiler.
I found one
Yeah.
bug, and when I contacted the vendor, they said, why are you coding it that way? And I said, well, it's legal C code, you're supposed to compile it. They said, but don't do it that way.
Yeah, that's the, hey doc, it hurts when I do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't do that, right? All right, anything else? All right, well, let's give our guests a round of applause. All right.